Hello, Cory.
Hello, Virginia.
I'm so glad that you're here to chat with me today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Well, since we already had one false start with some Zoom issues, we will go ahead and resume, pun intended. And if you just want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I was thinking I'll just go over my life story real fast.
Great.
So I grew I grew up in a Christian household. So I was really into Christianity. I went to a private Christian school where we studied the Bible every day, and that really helped teach me a lot about love and wisdom. And I think that really set a foundation for how I perceive the world. But eventually, I went to college, and I sort of got out of religion. Sort of started focusing more on the physical world, mainly focusing on my career and computer science and software engineering. And I still had like a loving personality, but spirituality wasn't a big part of my life. And so eventually got a couple internships at Google. I worked at Google for 4 years as a software engineer. And I really enjoyed my job, and that was like my main focus in life. And eventually I was leading like a team of 4 people, and really got promoted quickly. And like, I thought, this is what I'm doing for the rest of my life. I'm just gonna like move up high in the company and make a big effect on the world. But so God had other plans for me. So sort of had a big spiritual awakening about 2 years ago. And sort of how that went down was I met this woman. She also worked at Google, and we were in one of the cafes, and it was kind of like a love at first sight kind of thing, which is like I never really experienced anything like that before. So I think looking back on it, it was like a past life connection. But at that time, I had no idea what was happening. But she actually lived in Paris. She was from Moscow, but lived in Paris. And so about 2 years ago in April, I went to Paris to go visit her. And it was a crazy trip where her grandmother ended up passing while we were there, while I was there. And then also Notre Dame caught on fire when I was there. It was just like this crazy, like, spiritual time for me where like
Sorry,
things were just happening.
Oh my gosh, that is crazy. That is wild.
Yeah, I was just like, how is all this stuff happening? Like, I just thought the chances of this is like impossible. And that sort of just opened my eyes, like, is there something like deeper happening here? Like, what's happening? How is the Notre Dame caught on fire? Like, and then after that happened, like, we totally like she went separate ways. She's like, I think she got kind of depressed after like this whole situation. But I had like something's weird about this connection. I got to try to explore more. So I ended up sending her some music, and she was an artist too. So she'd post drawings on Instagram, and I was like following. And then what happened from my perspective was that these drawings were like of my life. I was like, how is she doing this? I was just like, I think nobody else could really know what that is like. I couldn't really tell people about it because I think they think I'm going crazy, but it was like crazy synchronicities. Like something would happen in that day, and then this drawing of it would happen. I was just like, what's happening? So at that time, I started exploring like Course in Miracles, also some other spiritual texts, and really opening up my mind to like, there's more going on here than the physical world. And so one night, I felt like called to like take some marijuana edibles, and they were legal in California at that time. So like that, yeah, because I was actually like, I'm a person who really follows the rules. So like, I think if it was illegal, I probably wouldn't have done it. So like, I think it was important. It was like that same year it got legal. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try it, see what happens. And all of a sudden I had like this crazy spiritual experience where like, I just understood everything. Like I saw the unity of everything. And it was sort of like, totally like God is real, like miracles are real, like everything makes sense. And like, what happened was part of it too is kind of weird is like, for like 4 hours, I would just like spinning my head around in circles.
Literally?
Like that. But I was getting, yeah, yeah, like like, but what's happening in my consciousness is like I feel like I was just downloading like all this information. Yeah. I guess somehow it's like moving my brain around. I almost felt like my brain was getting like rewired. Like it's, I haven't really told many people about this, but I figured this community would be open to some
Yes, you can talk about it here, Cory.
Yeah, yeah. And so after that, the next day I was like super exhausted. I had to like call sick into work. I was like, I can't go to work. And I was just like, my whole life has changed from this moment. So I ended up taking a month off of work. And I just like got to figure out what my life. And I actually, part of the download, I got all this information. I was just like, I got to write this down. So I started writing a book. So that's the book that I ended up publishing. Was I actually wrote the introduction like the week after this happened, where just like I just got called to, you got to write a book. And so I ended up quitting my job and went traveling around the world a little bit. Went to Costa Rica, Japan, the Virgin Islands. I did a big road trip in the Western United States, and before COVID hit. But like I feel like that's part of like getting prepared for like big world changes that are happening. Like higher spiritual beings or God called me to like, okay, you got service to do, you got work to do, so you got to leave your job. And I'm still trying to figure out my purpose in life, kind of thing, of like how I'm going to do this. I know there's like stuff I have to do, but I don't know exactly how I'm going to do it. Like I want to get more into teaching people, and I've been really focusing on my health recently too, like mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual health. So yeah,
Yes.
that's me. That's Cory in a nutshell. So.
Okay, well, plenty of fodder in that I am very excited to ask you about. So this is absolutely fascinating. So one of my first questions is, and I have a lot of questions from that. Have you had any insights into why it was important for you on this path, this one path that is yours and yours alone, to be a software engineer, or how that kind of like very thorough computing sort of power and practice is, because that's not necessarily an energy that you encounter a lot in these more less finite communities, we'll say.
Right. That's a great question. I sort of see it as like programming consciousness now is what I like to think about it as, is like
programming consciousness. Wow.
Programming consciousness. Yeah. So like I sort of see the brain as like a computer, and you put input inside of the computer and it changes how the brain functions. So I sort of see like, how do we build the architecture of the software? And also my specialty in software was testing. So when we write big software, especially at Google, we release to like billions of people. How do we make sure that it works for billions of people? We have all these automated tests that we create, that before we release the code, it makes sure it works, checks all of the features are working properly automatically. So I sort of thought about it like that for like consciousness. Like if we want to upgrade and evolve our consciousness, how do we make sure that like we can still survive in our bodies, or that all the functions are working properly mentally, and like so I thought about like writing tests in consciousness that make sure the consciousness is working properly. So as you evolve the consciousness, you don't lose the old features that you used to have. But,
wow, that's genius. So and so your book, which I'm going to link to, and I'm about halfway through. Yes. So The Dance of Love and Light. And something that I have noticed in both your book as well as your new YouTube channel, which I also hope to link to, if you're cool with that.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love new viewers. Yeah, especially if people are open to my ideas. I say I'm not afraid to share crazy ideas. So I like people who are open-minded.
Well, I think this is a good community for you then. So that is one of the that has been one of the most standout things that I've noticed from your writing and from your channel, is that for every teaching or theory or programming that you're espousing, there is this experiment to do along with it. So is that kind of what's going on here?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, like, I sort of found, like, you can read a bunch of spiritual texts and like understand it theoretically, but it doesn't actually change how you live. So I'm really into, like, how do you actually change your consciousness? And the only way I found is you have to change it yourself. Like, so because you choose how to perceive the world, like, I can give you all kinds of information, but you're the one choosing what that means. So I can say whatever words I'm saying, but you're the one interpreting it and changing how it gets stored into memory. So if I want to help other people change their consciousness, I have to sort of give them guidance to do it from the inside. Like, say, try doing this and see what happens as you change your consciousness. So that's why I'm all about the exercises and like the experience of it too. I love giving, like, music and art, and because all these things sort of are working on your consciousness. They go into your brain and are actually literally changing how your brain is perceiving the world. But it's up to you to decide how it gets changed, I guess. So.
Yes. So can you give us a couple examples of some of these big, like, reprogramming truths that you ascertained during this edible enlightenment episode? And then some of the experiments that go with them as well?
Yeah, I can try. Let's see here. Like, I think for me, one of the biggest ones is, like, thinking about what the light enters your eye and how you're perceived. Like, what is this hologram you're looking at? Because obviously all of us see something different in our minds. And so, like, one experiment I like to do is, like, look around and think about, like, where did the light come from? And think about the light traveling around you. So there's actually light everywhere, traveling in all different directions, but you're just looking at the light that hits your eye. And then your brain draws a hologram that represents the light that enters your eye. So one experiment is just, like, consciously thinking about the light entering your eye and drawing out the image that you're seeing. Just being aware of that, as for like a minute, just think about that. So
yeah. Two things, and I'll say both of them and then I'll give it back to you. So one, can you go over again what a hologram is in your own words? Because it's something we hear a lot, and it's like, I want to hear you explain what a hologram is. And then secondly, a book that you and I have talked about in the past, and that Susie and I talked about in our interview, or an idea, I guess, is this Douglas Harding and the Man with No Head. And so what you're saying, what I'm hearing you say then a little bit, like, you know, he gets woken up when he sees this self-portrait that a physicist does, that instead of it being of his face is of everything that he can see in front of him. So what I'm hearing you say is another way of saying that would be he's just drawing all the light that's hitting his eye.
Right. Yeah. So the hologram is like an image that you can think of it like a 3D image. So when you have your eyes, they have like a grid of cells on the back of your eye that collect the light data. And this is actually a 2D representation of the world around you. So by 2D, I mean it's like up and down, left and right. But you have two of them. And then the brain infers from that information distance as well. So you get a third dimension in there. So by a hologram, I'm meaning like a 3D image. So you can sort of, when you look at the world around you, you can see things are closer or further away. It's sort of like a 3D movie versus a 2D movie. I don't know if you've ever seen the 3D movie, you put on those glasses.
Yes.
So that's what I mean by the hologram, is you put on those glasses and you can see the third dimension. So our brain creates the image of the light that enters our eye. And that's like whenever your eyes are open, you have this image in your consciousness, right? And when you close your eyes, you don't have that image anymore. And then your imagination can also create images that, like dream state or astral travel or things like that. You have sort of other kinds of images that you can call those holograms too, depending on how good you are at visualizing the experience.
Right. And
then your second point was the Douglas Harding, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think you can sort of extend this out, not just like your vision, but like the sound, your touch, all your sensory input, and your imagination, your thoughts, and your emotions. Like all of these are your consciousness, as opposed to like they're representations of the body and the physical world, but they're not actually the physical world, because we all know we have errors in perception, right? Like you can look at something and think, oh, that's a snake over there, and then you go closer, oh, it's just a rope. But your perception can play tricks on you. And so that's part of, I think a big part of Course in Miracles too, is like, how do I get beyond this perception and into knowledge? And actually just knowing the world instead of needing to like, no, let me go investigate, But it's hard to get to the point where you just know things without needing to perceive them. But that's sort of the whole Course in Miracles.
Right. So what are some practices that you employ that help you to make that shift from perception to knowledge?
Yeah, so I still go through the workbook in the Course in Miracles every day. So I still do one every day. I have yet to go through all of them yet. I'm still I think I'm like less than 200 or something. I can't do it every day, but I say most days I can do one lesson. And then they also have like in the workbook, like, think about this every 15 minutes. I can't do that either. That's just way too much. But I've tried, and it's just too much. And also I've noticed you gotta be careful too, because it's easy to get ungrounded if you get too into these kinds of thoughts, because you are programming your mind. And you can get in states where you perceive the world totally differently than other people, and they just think you're crazy. So it's good to like always be grounded in the collective consciousness, and also like the physical world. And also you don't want to do things that can like harm you either. So that's why integration is so important. So I think that's what you've been saying about integration is, I think that's key. Because if you're just like all Course in Miracles and just everything's perfect, I'm not going to worry about anything, you can easily like harm yourself.
And others. And I think
and others too, for sure. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And I think that can be spiritual bypassing. And who talks about spiritual maybe someone commented this on my video, or I don't remember how it was shared with me, or maybe it was you, but about Marianne Williamson, and who I don't know, is, and I think she's a beautiful example actually of the grounding with A Course in Miracles, because how does she stay grounded? She takes those ideas and is like, I'm going to literally put these into politics. Like there's hardly anything that can make you more grounded than being involved in, local, national, whatever politics. And of course you can get too into that too. But when you have to figure out what it looks like, to actually love your neighbor, like for instance, in a political framework, it's like, that's integration. That's one way to do it.
Yeah, for sure. And I also think just like serving the world, like if you're just on a mountaintop meditating all the time, like, are you really helping other people who are lost in these perceptions? Like, so I think it's good to not get too far ahead of other people too. Like, it's important to teach, so we all go together collectively to the higher states, not just one person. And there's people starving and things like that. So I think that's why it's important to like give money to charity, volunteer. Like those are really grounding experiences too.
Yes.
And good service to the world. Yeah.
That's huge. I mean, I think you're hitting on something really important that I know I relate to, and that I'm sure a lot of people who are going to listen to this can relate to, because here's an example of how I got ungrounded in A Course in Miracles, because I read it, during my spiritual awakening in Guatemala last year, when I had all this alone time, and that I talk about in the chapter of a book I wrote, the chapter I wrote in a book called Visionary, which I will also link to here. And it, you know, talks again and again and again about how we are not the body. We are not the body. And so I got to this point of like, well, it doesn't matter what I do with my body then, because it's just my mind that makes my body. So I don't need to do yoga. Like I was for a while, I was doing yoga every day. I was like really concerned with like hydration and just all of these kind of self-care things about my body. And then I was just like, I don't need to do any of this. Like all I need to do is, you know, use my mind to create my body. And it was like very ungrounding.
For sure. I went like a couple months without brushing my teeth. Like that's how bad I got to.
Yes!
Like, why does it matter? And then like, wait, it doesn't work. I got to go backwards and keep brushing my teeth. So yeah, and I guess that sort of goes back to what I meant to with like the testing too. Like part of this is like, these are our tests. Like, can you keep a healthy body and things like that too? So we got to pass the test to stay healthy. And you can't just pretend everything's fine even when it's not.
Well, yeah. And right. Because that is spiritual bypassing. And, you know, a couple examples, I think of what you're talking about, like number one, it's like, okay, well, and in a totally enlightened, ascended master, you know, and someone who's practiced for however many thousands of years and lifetimes, like, yeah, they can just not move and make their teeth perfectly clean and white and all of these things. Right. Like I'm not there yet. So I still am here learning a lot of the physical lessons. And secondly, you know, one of the things that struck me when I was reading the New Testament for the first time, really earnestly, when I was in Guatemala, it's like, and I made a video about this that was probably very poorly spoken back when I began my channel, but I was like, you know, I think when they talk about animals and how we have dominion over animals, a lot of what that means is that it's a metaphor for our body. And I think of our body like our child or our animal, as in, even when we're going to all these ascended heights and we get it, like we still have to feed our children. Like my dog, Peter, doesn't understand those things. He still needs me to feed him and take care of him. You know?
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah. Like think of your body as like a child, and I thought about that a lot too. Like our bodies have a lot of ancestry too, of like karma. So I've been learning that too, where it's just like I understand from a theoretical perspective, I shouldn't be like emotional about whatever topic's happening, but sometimes things just come up. You know, the brain chemicals and things like that from your ancestry.
Yeah.
And taking responsibility for that to say, like, it's not my fault this is happening, but I'm still responsible for fixing whatever's happening in my body and my consciousness. Yeah.
That is so beautiful. And I relate to that a lot right now, which is kind of what I was saying in my last video of like, and I think, you know, this also has to do with living in paradox. It's like, it is true that the one mind that we all are creates everything, and that's all there is. It's also true that here I am in this human body with all this ancestral trauma and this brain chemistry and all of this that I'm carrying, all of these trapped emotions, all of the things. And part of my work is to like, I can have the thing where I'm like, okay, everything's the one mind, one love, and hold that truth. And also need to work on like my little stuff that I'm here to help heal for my family. But if I'm just like, okay, I can't think about bad, like all I can do is just think one love, one love, one love. Like, I think that that's missing the point a little bit.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think that, that's the biggest thing I've learned too, is the both answer to things. Like a lot of people present pick A or pick B. And I sort of been saying, no, we need to pick both. Like both perspectives are important to integrate. And I don't know if have you heard of bilocational consciousness?
No.
So like one meaning of it is like you're in two locations at the same time. So you're conscious of that. So you can imagine if you have two bodies, you could be, you know, in the United States and in China at the same time. Like that's a possible future thing we could possibly do. But for now, to start training up that kind of perception is perceiving two opposite perspectives at the same time. So sort of like it's not just A or B, but I'm actually conscious of both perspectives, and I'm perceiving reality from both perspectives simultaneously. So as I go live my life, I'm perceiving as a body, but also as, you know, the one mind of everything. So sort of I'm perceiving as the Father and the Son at the same time, and that sort of connection is the Holy Spirit in the Christian terms. And so you can have multiple locations of consciousness. It's interesting.
Dude, yes. Nailed it. And I mean, I think that that's so bilocational consciousness. I think that that's so powerful too, you know, for how divisive things feel right now, whether it's between political parties or between races or between, you know, genders or sexualities or religions. Like, instead of being so focused on digging deeper into making, you know, defending where you stand, like genuinely just trying to go into that experience of also simultaneously being the other, because also like that is true that we're both of those and all of those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think like eventually it's like proceeding from whoever you're talking to's perspective at the same time as your perspective. It's kind of like you're talking to yourself, but like I'm also the other person I'm talking to at the same time. Kind of interesting way to do it too. Yeah, like empathy is part of that.
That's what I was just thinking. We're basically coming, you know, and that I love too, because whenever you're hitting on some aspect, I think of a capital T truth, you're like, oh, okay, well, the word for that in this arena would be empathy. The word for it in this arena would be like bilocational consciousness. Like,
Yeah.
you know, and it again brings me back to the idea of the man with no head, because literally what he says then is when you're talking to someone else, like that's your face that you're looking at, you know? So, I mean,
that's interesting. I haven't thought about it, but yeah, that's, you can imagine that's my face too. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So what are some of the practices, be they body, and actually let's do that. So body, mind, spirit, that are really helping you right now, or that you're most focused on?
That's a good question. So body, I'm doing like workout routines. So I actually started taking Aikido classes last year. It's a martial art from Japan.
Dude, I just want to just shout out like one of my new really good friends, Kesia, who I mentioned quite a bit. She is an Aikido black belt, and her dad.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, is a teacher, and so that's so cool. More Aikido. All signs point to Aikido.
Yeah. Like I think it's a great practice. It's also very spiritual as well. So they even have like healing aspects of it, and the main idea is like becoming one with your opponent. So it's like my goal is not to like harm anybody, but if you're gonna try to harm me, I got to figure out a way to make sure you don't harm me, and I'm gonna try to do it without harming you either. So it's like a good physical representation of setting boundaries. Like I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm just doing it because I need to protect myself, you know. And I'm trying to do it in the least harmful way. So I found that really helpful. I'm not taking it anymore because it's like COVID. It got really hard to train it. But I still am in touch with the instructor, and he also runs a fitness program that I'm doing. So it's just like body weight. You get like a yoga mat and you just do like high intensity interval training. But I find that really helpful for training the body of sort of mastery of mind over body. Other things I've been trying is like cold showers. Yes. So I'll go in the shower and do like really hot, really cold, really hot, really cold. That's good training. And also being in darkness. Like I actually find there's like a lot of fear comes up. I'm just sitting in the dark. I know nothing's gonna hurt me, but I just can like just sit there with my eyes open, and all these fears come up, like you're probably ancestries of getting hurt in the dark or things like that. So trying to clear those fear programs that are running in the consciousness. So sort of just trying to see what triggers my fear and figuring out how to overcome it has been a good practice too.
Yes. And that reminds me of, I've talked about the book Breath before by James Nestor, which is like, yes, go find that book, everyone. And it reminds me of how he talks about Wim Hof breathing and, which is essentially hyperventilation, and Wim Hof is all about the cold showers. I never thought of this with the dark too, but I think it's the same thing, because the way he explains it is that we're essentially training or reprogramming our bodies to realize that this is not a fight or flight, like that we can be in situations that before would have triggered panic and all this adrenaline and all this cortisol, like ice cold water, like darkness, like breathing really heavily, and instead show ourselves, I'm choosing this. So then when I do go into a situation like this, essentially, like, I've trained for it and I know that it's not actually life or death, because I wouldn't have kept choosing and practicing something that was going to kill me. It didn't.
Yeah, for sure. And it's kind of I realize too how how irrational the fear is too. Like in the Course in Miracles, it talks about this all this time, but when you actually go try these experiments, it's like, yeah, I'm not getting hurt at all. Like it's safe, but it's just my perception of it that's broken. So I'm trying to fix my perception, say, no, this is not as scary as it looks. And I think it's not all in the brain either. I think you can have these traumas and just like your nerves or in your muscles, like all over your body, you can hold trauma.
Yes.
And this sort of just brings it up so that you start healing your body. And I think that's sort of one thing too. I've like in the Law of One, they talk about like the first thing to do is initiate your mind into like higher consciousness. And then the next step is to initiate your body. So like once you like perceive from your mind, okay, now my body has all this trauma too that now my mind's free. I can use that to work on my body. And that sort of is a good step, good spiritual work too, to learn how to, like, say if I can learn how to heal my body, I can then learn how to heal other people too, who are stuck in these traumas and things.
Dude, I resonate with that. And, I talked about how, and we've talked about this, and these are all different, languages or takes on the same truths. For me, a lot of it has been coming around to astrology and tarot and, my chart. So for anyone who knows anything, and I am a total novice, so bear with me. Learning about the houses though, right? And there are 12 houses as well as 12 zodiac signs. And so and then I think there are 7 planets instead of 9. Like I think it's the 7 original planets, or maybe it's 9. I could be wrong. The point is I have six of my planets are in the 4th house of like family and generational, and that's where generational trauma and all of this ancestry stuff is. And so, everyone's path is different. And I highly recommend to people, like, finding out about your chart. It's a cool way to study yourself, just in the same way that like personality tests or all of these different things are cool ways to study, why we chose to incarnate in this body, in this place, in this time. And for me, it's like what you just said resonated so much because, my mind is quite capable of making a lot of, and I'm drawn to that, to this deep thinking and connecting and ascension. And I think my body with my, ancestry and family trauma is like kicking and screaming and throwing these tantrums. And so so I want to hear, and also, can you tell people a little bit more about the Law of One? Because I didn't know until you told me. So.
Sure. So in the 80s, there were these 3 people who channeled this material from an extraterrestrial being.
Naturally.
And they sort of cover that there's like 7 densities of experience. And of course, Law of One means everything's one, but I think we all know that in the spiritual communities nowadays, but sort of more into the materials, like there's 7 densities of experience. And it's sort of like there's different octaves of experience too. So first, you can imagine everything's one. It splits into as many tiny pieces as possible. And so you imagine like all the atoms, like the Big Bang. It's a new universe. It's a new octave. And then that's the first density. And then the second density, you start getting into like plants and animals. So eventually these atoms, form stars and planets, and eventually get plants and animals. And it's getting more and more conscious each density. And from second density, you get third density, which is where humans are now, which is the density of self-awareness. So plants and animals have like they have awareness of something, but they don't have awareness of themselves. But now humans, we have awareness of ourselves. And that's the third density. And the third density, you make a choice. You can either choose to serve other people, or you can choose to serve yourself. And that's the two paths to get to the next density of experience. And so they say like to graduate, it's sort of like the harvest, they call it, from like even Jesus was saying, the harvest, like the people who do good things go to heaven, people who do bad things go to hell. But in this model, it just means that the people who have enough choice to serve other people or to serve themselves get to graduate to the next level. And the people who are still not quite there yet repeat like third grade again. So they may go to a different planet, incarnate with other third density beings, keep learning the lessons until they're ready for the fourth density. And the fourth density is collective consciousness, where the goal is then to go love other people for the service to others. And for the service to self, their goal is to dominate other people. So these are sort of like the angels and demons that we have in religions. They come down and their goal is to try to get us to choose their side. So it's sort of like in Star Wars, you have the light side and the dark side. And so they're trying to manipulate us. Well, the dark side is at least trying to manipulate us to be dark. And the light side is trying to help us to be light. But the light side is more like free will. Like, if you want to be light, be light. If you want to be dark, be dark. Like, we know how to set boundaries, so we're good. But that's your choice in third density. You get to sort of see both sides. Like, which one do I want to do for the next million years or so? Which path do I want to take? And so once you graduate to fourth, and then you go to fifth, you learn wisdom. So they say the fourth density is all about learning how to maximize your love, either love of others or love of self. Fifth density is all about wisdom. How do I make the best decisions to get what I want? And both the positive and the negative, the service to others and service to self, learn these lessons of wisdom. And then in the sixth density, the polarity disappears. Everything reunites together again. So once you advance to a certain stage, everybody realizes everything is one and works to serve everything. So Ra, the people, the extraterrestrial being that Law of One channels, claims to be a sixth density being. So they're already like reunited with everything, and they see sort of looking down to try to pull to help everybody evolve to higher densities, and eventually get to seventh density, which is like everything's one again, and gets ready to create a new universe. So eventually we're all going to evolve up back into oneness, and then we'll decide to create a new universe to go explore with new laws perhaps. And, sort of the multiverse, each universe is an octave of experience. And that just is like touching the surface of Law of One. It goes way deeper into everything. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I really like that way of looking at it. I mean, and to me, one of the nicest things, I guess it could be nice, it could be debilitating, but to me, it feels nice, of like humbling, like, okay, we're only like less pressure is what it feels like to me. Like, cause
right.
Here, as far as humans only being at level 3, because here on Earth, there is very much this paradigm and this narrative of like, humans are the most advanced thing that's ever happened, even though all of our mythologies and religion, all of them have all of these higher ascended beings present on different levels to show us, like, or even the idea of aliens, right? Like it's all over our consciousness to show us like, no. But when we are living in that paradigm, it just feels like so much pressure. And to me, it feels comforting to put it in a framework of like, okay, like have some grace, like you're only in third grade, like.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yep, we also gotta go to college eventually. So we're still just learning the basic lessons of consciousness, and like that's why we make so many mistakes, because we're like in kindergarten, just like we just barely became conscious of ourselves. So of course we have a lot of work to do. And there's also an interesting concept they talk about, which is wanderers, which is people who come from higher densities and incarnate in lower densities to help people. So likely a lot of people in the spiritual community here would be wanderers, where we might have been like at a higher level at one point, and we looked down on Earth and said, they got some problems down there. We got to go try to help them. And we can't like violate their free wills. So the only way we can help them is to become them. So we're going to go live the life of a human. And sort of like a Jesus Christ story, like we're like a higher being, and we come down and live as and learn, why are these humans struggling so much to graduate? Like, why don't they choose to serve other people or just to serve themselves? But they're kind of stuck in this middle place. They call it the sinkhole of indifference, where people just are like, they don't really care about anything. And when you don't care about anything, you can't advance. So you either have to say, I care about the world and other people, I'm gonna go serve lots of people, or I really care about myself and I'm just gonna really optimize for myself. And then you have enough, like high enough vibration to go to the next level.
Right. I think that it's really, and we won't, okay, clear that this is just going to be the first of many chats for us, which I'm very excited about over time. So much to learn from you. I just so we'll start to wrap this up. I think I feel surprised, and maybe some people would feel surprised to hear that either the path to serve others or to serve self can get you there, right? We're all like, no, like self-serving, but actually, so if you could speak a little more on that, because it's like, you're basically saying actually the only wrong path you can take is just apathy, like not serving anything.
Right. Yeah. According to this model. Yeah. And so the idea is that you need either like 95% service to yourself, which is just like, I just care about myself more than anything. Or 51% service to others. So you care more about others than yourself. Those are the rough percentages. Like I want to say rough because we don't have a clear way to measure how much you serve other people or yourself. But that's what they provide as in the Law of One material. And I guess the reason for this too is just to create the most interesting reality possible. Because if we're just infinite beings, like we're sort of looking for like, what's the most unique thing to try? What happens if I just serve myself? But the problem with that is that like, in order to be so selfish, you're going to have lots of negative karma coming. And that's going to be really painful to handle. And so you're going to have lots of anger and sadness. And what they have to learn to do in the service to self path is just sort of ignore it. Like, so they have all this pain in their consciousness and they're just like not pretending it's not there to keep doing what they're doing. So they get really separated from everything else. And it's actually like a really painful path. But I guess the one infinite creator, which is what the Law of One calls God, chose to split itself to try as an experiment to see what would happen. And I guess part of it too is like the third density, sort of like who can handle this pain and suffering for millennia? Because like a lot of people are like, I don't want this pain and suffering. I'm going to the service to others path. And we go to like heaven and like ideal societies in the fourth density where it's just like a harmony and things like that, because that's what we like. But I guess some other people were built to like pain and suffering, and I don't know why, but that just according to this model, and it sort of helps explain evil too, like why people choose to be evil and things like that, because they can develop a lot of spiritual power on this path too. And it's sort of like they view themselves as God essentially, but not as God as in I want to love everybody because God is loving. More like I'm the God. I tell everybody what to do. I'm the manipulator. I'm the master manipulator. Like this is my dream. It's all an illusion, but I'm going to take this illusion and just manipulate everything in my dream, and not have any empathy or things like that. Compared to the positive path is like, yeah, it's an illusion, but there's still people suffering. So I'm going to try to help them.
Right. Even if they're just projected aspects of myself, like that are suffering. So there's so many layers there. And I think part of what you're touching on, you know, though, is like, there's a saying in the Tao, or at least it's the Stephen Mitchell translation of it, which is my favorite one because it's like a short book of poems rather than like a book, you know, however many hundreds of thousands of words, the original by Lao Tzu. And it's, it's something along the lines of, do you really think you can improve the world? I don't think it can be done. Like, it can't be done. And I just say that to say, you know, what you just illustrated, and I'm sure, you know, the law of one explains it that way, like many other things explain it other ways, but it's like the universe isn't, and physics shows us this, everything is in perfect balance for it to even exist right now. So, and we're all on the path back to atonement and back to oneness, whatever that looks like. So including, you know, the paths that it's like of the Hitlers and the Stalins and the whoever, like, this is also part of the path. But it doesn't, you know, it also doesn't mean, do you think you can improve the world? I don't think it can be done. That doesn't mean do nothing. Like, it means, you know, you're going to have to go out there and try, but whatever happens as you're out there doing that, don't think that that's not perfectly part of the plan, I guess, because it has to be if it is.
Right. Definitely. And like, everything's here now, and, you know, like the future and the past are just in our imagination. And I think that everything's perfectly balanced, but it does also not at the same time. And it's the same paradox we were talking about before. Yeah. Yes. It's both. It's both, not either or. Yeah.
Love it. Okay. Well, I am going to, you know, wrap this up now. And unfortunately, I feel like the video quality of this may not be what I wanted. So if this is just the audio, thanks for listening, everybody. The video quality will be better next time. We'll see. Cory, thank you so much for this interview, slash
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
And like I said, everybody, I'm linking to Cory's book, Cory's YouTube channel, anything else that he asked me to link to. I think it's pretty clear to me that you're a highly intelligent and compassionate and evolved being. So I'm excited to continue learning from you and to connect you to other people who might be drawn to as well.
Thank you. And I enjoy learning from you as well.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I will talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.